start with something personal. I am by most measures easy to be with. I remember things about people, I ask follow-up questions, I check in, I show up, I make things comfortable. I have never been described as being difficult. I have never been the person who makes a room awkward. And yet, if I'm being completely honest, I can count my close friends on less than one hand. For example, I have a friend called Chris. We met back in the university. Currently, he's not in the continent. And our friendship, as real as it is not what it used to be when, we were literally living the same kind of life, in the same place, bump into each other literally every day. Recently, I read an article that I could relate with, an article that I could see myself in, and that article said, people who are genuinely nice but have no close friends are not socially inept. They are just operating with a version of kindness that makes vulnerability an impossibility for them. When I read that article, I could recognize myself in it, and that is what gave rise to this episode. Hello, and welcome back to Call Her Eche. My name is Eche Zanachi Awa, and this podcast is essentially me thinking out loud about modern life. I'm bringing in science, history, culture, and even psychology to make sense of it. I'm glad you're here. Now, back to what we were talking about. I want to talk about this today because I think it is one of the quietest, most misunderstood forms of loneliness that exist. And I think a lot of people listening right now know exactly what I mean, even though people that experience this or people that fit into this don't say it out loud. They literally never do. You're not isolated, you're not antisocial. People genuinely enjoy your company. You get invited to things, you're warm, you're thoughtful. You're the kind of person people call when they need help. The kind of person they call when they want someone to make them feel understood. And somehow, at the end of the day, there is almost no one that knows exactly what's going on with you. How did that happen? Let's start with science, because it's more specific than I expected. There are two psychologists, Harry Rice and Philip Shaver, who built what they call the interpersonal process model of intimacy. And what they found across multiple studies where people tracked their social interactions in real time was that intimacy doesn't form the way most of us think it does. We tend to assume that closeness is about time, is about proximity, about being around someone enough, but that's not actually what their research found. What they found is that intimacy forms through a cycle. One person shares something personal, something emotionally real, not just some facts or opinions, but something they actually experienced, something that cost them something to say. And the other person also responds in a way that feels genuinely understanding. And both of them experience that exchange as real. That's the cycle. That's how closeness actually builds. And the critical finding, the one that stopped me in my tracks, was this: emotional disclosure is a far stronger predictor of intimacy than any other kind of disclosure. It's not enough to talk to someone regularly. It's not enough to share what you think or what you know. Closeness requires sharing what you actually feel. And now here's where it gets interesting. This person I'm describing, this person who is warm, helpful, perpetually easy to be around, is often an exceptional listener. They are great at the receiving end of this cycle. They make people feel heard, they respond in all the right ways, they validate, they follow up, they remember, but they never initiate the disclosure that would start the cycle on their own end. They hold up their half of the bridge, but they never walk across it. So what happens? The other person feels close to them, feels seen by them, feels safe with them, but that closeness never becomes mutual because the information only flows one way. And the person everyone likes remains a stranger. Now you might be asking, why does this happen? This is where I want to bring in something that goes deeper than just personality. Because I don't think this is something people choose. I think it's something people learn, like some sort of means of survival, if you would say that. There's a psychologist named Dana Jack who identified a pattern she called silencing the self. And when I read the description of it, I laughed. Because it was so accurate and it was uncomfortable actually. Silencing the self is the tendency to be endlessly agreeable, to prioritize other people's comfort, to suppress your own emotions, your own needs, and never express them. Because somewhere along the way, you learned that expressing your needs makes things harder for the people around you. And this is the part that I think matters. These are not people who don't want to connect with others. They desperately want it. The strategy of making yourself endlessly pleasant and never burdening anyone, it's an attempt to achieve intimacy. It just happens to be the exact strategy that prevents intimacy from happening. So you might ask, where did this start? For many people, it starts in childhood. Yeah, when you grow up in an environment where expressing your needs creates tension, where saying something like I'm struggling or I need help puts pressure on someone who is already overwhelmed. You know, we are being easy, being helpful, being the one who didn't need anything was, the way you got your love or you got your praise or, the way you kept things stable. That was something you learned early. You kind of learned that your needs are a burden, that your feelings are an imposition, and that the safest version of you is the one that asks everyone, how are you doing? But never answers that question honestly about yourself. And that lesson does not stay in childhood. It grows with you. It follows you. It becomes so woven into who you are, into how you move through the world, that by the time you are an adult, it doesn't even feel like a strategy anymore. It's just who you are. I'm just a good listener. I'm just not someone who overshares. I just don't like to put my problems on people. But underneath all of that, the loneliness is real. It's quiet and it's very, very confusing because on the surface, everything looks fine. And now let me add a layer that I think explains why this pattern is more common now than it might have been in previous generations. There is a concept in evolutionary biology and anthropology around what friendship actually required for most of human history. For most of our existence as humans, as a species, we lived in small, stable communities. You didn't choose your social circle, you were born into it. You lived alongside the same people for decades. You shared hardships, shared survival, shared everything. That is how it was. Closeness was not manufactured. It happened because you literally had no choice. That is what it was. And what researchers of friendship consistently find is that two things accelerate closeness more than anything. 1, repeated unplanned interaction, and 2, proximity over time. The old word for this is propinquity. Yeah, just being around people regularly without an agenda. But you see, modern life has quietly dismantled these two things. We are the most mobile generation in human history. We move for various reasons. University, work, relationship, due to cost of living, communities are no longer stable. The friends you made when you were in the same place, like my friend Chris, get scattered for some reason, and rebuilding that kind of closeness as an adult now requires deliberate effort in a way it never used to. And that effort, oh goodness, we most times don't have time for it. And it's not because we don't care. And for the person who already struggles to show up vulnerably, who already finds it hard to initiate this emotional disclosure cycle, that added friction of, this gap makes it almost impossible to close it. You mean well, you stay in touch, you send messages, you like their photos, their posts, their status, but that actual closeness, it keeps slipping further away. And there is also something that is worth saying about what the whole digital connection has replaced. It has not replaced friendship, because you're still friends with these people, but it has replaced the feeling of loneliness. Just enough to take the edge off it. Just enough so that you don't feel the full weight of that gap. You scroll, you see people, social media, you feel a faint sense of contact, and it kind of dulls that ache. But the actual need, that desire to be known, to be seen, to have someone notice when you go quiet, that need is not met. It's just temporarily sedated. And for the person who already has difficulty expressing their own needs, that sedation is almost too convenient, because it means you don't have to risk the discomfort of actually reaching out and saying, I'm not okay, I miss you, I need something real. So on the long term, what exactly does this mean? Another research on loneliness. And let me be clear, I'm not talking about being alone. I'm talking about that feeling of not being known. A research on it shows that its effects on health is roughly equivalent to smoking 15 cigarettes a day. 15. It's not a soft emotional inconvenience. It's a psychological stressor that accumulates. And here's the thing I keep coming back to. The most vulnerable people, the people who are most vulnerable to this particular kind of loneliness, the ones I've been talking about, are also among the least likely to name it. Because naming it would require doing the exact thing they've spent their whole lives avoiding. It will require them reaching out to someone saying, I'm struggling, I need more than this, I want our friendship to be closer, I matter, something like that. And most times it's like the hardest thing for them to say. And it's not because they don't believe in it, but because, when you've lived with something for so long, it has become a part of them. From something that happened a long time ago, maybe in childhood, maybe in a dynamic they didn't quite choose, they never really learned how to express exactly what they are feeling. Now I want to end here, but with this observation. Being liked is not the same as being known. They can coexist. They often do. And you can spend an entire life surrounded by people who find you warm, wonderful, easy to be around, but you remain completely invisible. And no, it's not a character flaw. It's not a social failure. It's a strategy that once kept things intact for you. But the question you need to ask yourself right now is, that strategy, is it still serving you? Is it still working for you right now? So just so you know, these are my thoughts. You might recognize yourself in them. You might even recognize someone you know. Either way, I'd love to know what you think. You can drop what you think in the comment section. Have you walked through this? Have you grown through this? Are you now maybe a little bit more easy to connect with your friends? How did you do it? I'm sure a lot of people will want to know that. So drop it in the comment section. And this is Call Her Echa again. I'll see you again next week. And until then, take care.